What? Like acquired taste.
An acquired taste?
That's probably says that bread is that red? No, that brown. That's brown.
Brown bread stuff.
Black, brownish bread.
Pumpernickel?
Pumpernickel,
Oh, pumpernickel, rye.
I would say,
Dude, yeah.
you have to just like it crisp.
Well, I like it when I get to go shopping at Kroger because, most people, or a lot of people, don't like different bread. They want white bread, wheat bread. But you can go into, Kroger and they'll clear their bread out. So when I get to go shopping, I get to pick the bread out. Which Jill would rather have wheat bread than white bread any day of the week. So, but my kids don't. They rejoice when there's white bread in the house. Yay, we have white bread! Yay! But, anyway.
I used to be like that, but now I'm like, there's white bread.
No.
White bread's only good for toast.
And tomato sandwich.
Oh, it gets all soggy.
Honey wheat bread.
Honey wheat bread.
Perfect
Oh, you're a
tomato
soggy
sandwich.
tomato sandwich guy.
I do.
Oh,
Absolutely.
that makes me gag.
That's okay. You can gag all you want.
I also could just put mayonnaise on it. Soggy bread.
Soggy bread.
Tomato sauce. Yeah. You don't like tomato sandwich, you like tomato sauce.
No, I know. I'm lying. I just like the white bread. Because I'm not. Stuff starts getting, like cereal starts getting soggy, I'm done.
You're not eating it fast enough.
That's
That's my
exactly
thing.
right.
If I'm eating cereal that will get soggy, then I have to eat it by fast.
Yeah. Well, I was fixing to say, where's there ever a case in my life where I don't eat cereal fast enough for it to get to a place where it even gets soggy? So, anyway, how everybody doing? You doing okay?
Yeah,
All right, good. All right. Well, I'm gonna take the approach that for the next few weeks we're gonna try to expand our conversation on I am a church member, and see. We've got some questions that are built into each chapter that we can look at. I also want to dig into some of the passages a little bit. We don't have to. Next week we'll expand Ephesians 4, which will be beneficial. But just look at some of these questions and look at church membership as a priority and what it means. Last week we talked about the importance of being a functioning church member. I had already prefaced it with the conversation last week by asking, what's the deal? Why is it people come, come once a month or twice a month or once every 6 months? What's the mental process? And we got some insight last week from the folks that were here and came down on the side of the fence of, one of the reasons is people are lazy. I don't know why that justifies or we rationalize that in our head and say, well, that's a good excuse. But that's a reality. I think also part of it is we don't understand the importance of it, of being a part of a body and functioning as a body. I tried to use the analogy and the reality of, like past Sunday morning, how many people were probably here? 70, 80 folks were here. But there's coming a day, and again, it'll be this month or next month, where he's in the dark over there. It's like creepy. It's dark out there, man.
Just ask PJ to turn around.
And just comes creeping up. So anyway, but we'll have a day where there'll be 125 folks here. It'll be packed next door, and you look around and go, there's maybe like 2 visitors here. The rest of it's us. It's our folk. So where are we? The other 3 or 4 weeks out of the cycle or whatever. What's going on? And that was kind of prefacing what we're doing with I'm a church member and why I would even take us through a book study on a Sunday morning. I don't mind on Sunday nights because I know my Sunday night crew. Most of the folks come on Sunday night well grounded in their faith. So if we go on a book study, it's not gonna be a train wreck for them or build some bad theology. And Wednesday night I would say the same thing. Sunday morning I try to stay away from it because I want us to build good Bible study. And a good way to do that is week to week. Next week I know Justin preached Romans 1. He's going to be in 2 next week, and then it's going to be in 3. I just think that's healthy. Didn't read the article, but or skimmed it, I guess, this week. Somebody posted that the vast majority of pastors are keeping their people away from the truth. It's like, what? I would be the vast majority of pastors. What are we talking about here? So I went and looked up the article and what they're talking about. This article is specifically talking about dealing with political issues, and I'm like, I feel like that's my responsibility. My responsibility is to preach the truth, and you deal with the political issues. But the writer of the article or the blog or whatever was saying, yeah, this the pastor's responsibility. I'm like, nah, I preach the truth, and then you and the Holy Spirit work those things out. So why would Tom Rainer take the time to write this book? And most of you know the intro to the book is it really started off as a blog. He's sitting there kind of throwing his thoughts out there, and got a ton of feedback from church leadership and membership as to the reality of why church membership is not important. And that's where we are with the statistical data that was put together by Rainer. And some of it is put together with Barna's group, but a lot of it is Rainer asking Southern Baptist churches, since he's the president of Lifeway, and Lifeway is the publishing arm, I guess is the best way to explain it. It's a company is what it is. But they give 10% back to Southern Baptists. So we have a real close relationship with Lifeway, and that's why I try to promote Lifeway as much as we can, because we know it's going back into what we're doing as ministry. Anyway, with that publishing arm and him leading that, understanding the impact, because a lot of our Sunday school classes, they're opening these books up that are published by Lifeway. So hearing all that information gives us the reason when we come to this place. And then he gives the generational problem. That 2/3 of the builder generation, those born 1946 and prior, 2/3 of those, the term that he uses are Christians. Okay, so if you go and ask them, they're actively involved in a church fellowship. Where 15% of millennials, those are born from 1980 to 2000, are involved in a church. Okay, what's the difference? Where's the separation? Why? And so that church membership is not a priority to people, that it's an add-on, that we do it. A lot of people do it because they're supposed to, because it's cultural, because it's a heritage. It's part of, my family's always gone to church, so we go to church. So he comes to this, writing this, and gives us a story to start it off with two guys, Michael and Liam, who are good friends, who come together, start having a Bible study together. Michael's more plugged in, Liam's disengaged. And I like kind of the questions that he gets to at the end of the little introduction. I'm trying to he gets to the end of their conversation. They've been talking, and Liam's kind of complaining about what's going on at the church. And he goes through all this stuff, and he finally gets to the end. He says, "Don't take me wrong, but I wonder at times if you're blind to all the problems in the church." And he's whined about, they don't play the right kind of music, and the preacher's not deep enough for me. I always love that one. I need to go someplace where I can be fed. Really? If you're going to be fed, you're going to be the one feeding yourself. Because what a preacher does in the pulpit, no. Even the best. I mean, you sit and listen to, if you listen to MacArthur, you listen to Piper, they're probably preaching for 45 minutes to an hour anyway. Most people can't stomach that. But any of the people in their congregation that are even growing are feeding themselves. They're not getting it from the pulpit. No, there's only so much I can do, any preacher can do or pastor can do on Sunday morning. So he says, don't get me wrong, I wonder at times if you're blind to all the problems in the church. Then he says, Liam, offering a closing that really spoke more than he realized. We are really two different types of church members. And that's where we are. We have people that have bought in. And what I mean by that is this is a priority. That what we do here is important. Sunday school, Sunday morning, anything else that's going on, those things are a priority, and they're important because they're important to God. They become important to me, and that's where you get the buy-in. I can guilt anybody. PJ's now in here, so he gets to speak to some of the deacons' meetings. But there's one specific deacon that always gives me a hard time. He's like, we ought to start working on like some performance-based pay grade around here for the pastor, and like based on baptisms and people joining the church. I was like, I can play that game if you want to. So you give me. We can't afford you, right? If you do that. No, right? I mean, no, you would be able to afford me. I could do it. We could sell some prayer cloths, and I could. hey, we'll give away $1,000 next Sunday. What happens in that church? We won't have church in that church. We'll have to come out here and set up chairs. We can get people to come to church. I can get people to join the church. Oh, you a sorry person because you won't join the church. And we can do that stuff, but that's not what Scripture teaches. And so getting people to understand that's important is a huge deal. But ultimately, God has to convince you that this place and this people is a priority. And so Rainer starts this whole thing off with a study of 1 Corinthians 12, talking about the body, but he makes a very valid point, and as a preacher, I am encouraged by what he says here, is you got to take 12, 13, and 14 as a whole. That when Paul is addressing the problems at Corinth, and the problems at Corinth were a lot. The list that I gave was sexual immorality, religious diversity, and corruption was going on in Corinth, the city, but what had happened to the people in the church? Same thing, crept in. What happens to us? The culture creeps in. Sometimes good things from the culture creep in, I think beneficial things, and sometimes it's negative. But where Paul is doing his ministry to church at Corinth, they're jacked up. And so the letter I can't imagine the letter that Paul gets from the Corinthian church for him to have to respond the way he does in 1 Corinthians and then ultimately in 2nd. And there are a lot of theologians and a lot of historians that say there's a third one floating around either before or after 1 Corinthians that's either in between 1st and 2nd or came before. So I would wonder what it had to be like for Paul to get that scroll and unroll it and start reading, oh, geez, this church, these people that I led to faith, these people that I had a hand in them coming to faith. And, he says he didn't baptize about 4 or 5 of them, like one family, a couple other people. So he didn't baptize a lot of them, but led them to faith and established the church at Corinth. Now they're here. And I would say the same thing. It would be a great burden to me if God were to lead me away and, 2 years down the road, Tyus is in chaos. It would burden me, even if God, if it was God's call to lead me away. So, so when he comes to 1 Corinthians, he's dealing with the problems, and like I said this past Sunday, I won't probably say it every week. The stuff that we're reading in here, those of you that have read it or taken some time to look at the chapters, do we have big problems in these areas that are in this book?
I would say so far, first chapter, I think we can say probably yes.
Okay.
Second chapter, if we do, maybe I'm not plugged in enough, if the worst, to be aware of chapter 2's type stuff. I never see it.
Right. Chapter 2 to me is the most important in the book, but it's probably the one where we get right the most of all of them. And I would say of all the chapters, we do fairly well. And that was my whole point Sunday, is we're good. Man, God has blessed us around here. And I know TJ has seen it, PJ has seen it, because we've talked. Jess, you're too young to remember it, right? You guys weren't even born. So Josh, you're the only wild card here where you've seen bad church problems. Where it got ugly. PJ, it got ugly. TJ, it was your home. Your dad was having to deal with all it. You saw it firsthand. The stuff that Tyus dealt with, over the years there's probably been little blips, but 1974 I think was the split. Right? Come on. So Josh, have you ever watched some ugly church stuff? Not how you were treated, but the church as a whole. So you've seen some of the ugly. Okay. That is more the rule than the exception. We're the exception. For 15 years, for the biggest dissent being, and that's so funny to me, the biggest dissent was one person 8 years ago didn't want to build this building. That's it. In 15 years, that's the only thing. And they just said they voted no. Every other vote.
There was some discussion in
right.
one of our meetings, and that was it.
And it took like 2 minutes.
Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah.
Right. So that's what I'm saying. When you look at this, you go, why in the world doesn't we need to do this? Because I think we need to strengthen it. I think we just need to strengthen it. We need to bolster this Because the second chapter, and that's why I say it's so important what we talk about this morning about unity, that's where Satan loves to work. That's what he loves to target is the unity of the church. So that being said, we see why Paul would deal with this. So what were some of the problems at Corinth that you guys can remember? What's some of the things that pop out? What are things they argued about or fussed over or they were doing that was sinful?
They saying, well, I follow this person's teachings and I follow this person and I follow this person.
Mm-hmm. Very early on, Paul says, some of you were saying that I'm of Paul, I'm of Apollos, I'm of Peter. Some of you, being super spiritual, saying I'm of Christ. And so they were arguing over the leadership of the church. Because reality was, Paul had led some people to faith, Peter had led some people to faith, Apollos had come in and preached and led people to faith. But Paul's trying to get them to understand that no, it's not these leaders. Christ is the head, and we're all following him. So yeah, there was, I guess, power struggle, disagreement, fussing. Okay, what else we got?
Since it was a major trade route, I guess because of that, one of the richest cities in the world. On, I don't know, even customs, I don't really know how to say it.
Right.
Outside influence and
Sure.
And any religion you could find anywhere, any idols you wanted to pay or pray, or
right. So there were the religious diversity in Corinth was bad enough, but now you got people that were Jewish, people that were pagan, people that come from all different backgrounds, religious backgrounds, are now a part of a body, of a fellowship. So we don't have to deal with that so much in here at Tyus, because what is Tyus mainly made up of? Mainly middle class, white, Christian, like raised Christian. I mean, we won't have many people that join that were pagans, that were out sacrificing goats, that come join Tyus and go, hey, when are we going to sacrifice a goat? We don't have that problem, okay?
I have a side note here. Since
Okay.
degradation and immorality abounded, there were many religions represented, even the temple, which offered 1,000 sacred prostitutes. Pleasure was worshipped more than principle.
Absolutely, absolutely. And we see that because Paul has to get into a conversation about a stepmom. All right, so that had even creeped in. So we're blessed in our context here at Tyus that we don't have people that are, which I would love for it to be that way, that we have people joining that were coming from pagan cultures or whatever, that were coming to Christ. But we don't have to deal with that. Like, people don't come in and join the church and 6 months later going, man, we need to start playing some rock and roll on Sunday. If they come to Tyus, they understand. So Corinth was dealing with that. But then we get into chapter 12, and it's really interesting. 12, 13, and 14 is not only are they talking about these secular problems, but they're talking about religious problems. So when you get into 12, 13, and 14, they're getting to this place where I'm better than you are. And then the reason I'm better than you are is because of my giftedness. And that's where Paul has to start off, and why we started off in 12. We didn't get into 14 because I don't think 14 is necessary for the conversation, but to know that it's in the backdrop and to know that's part of the context is important. But as far as understanding what was going on in Corinth, yes, you need to understand 12, 13, and 14. 12 says, look, we're all part of a body, and every part is necessary. For Paul's context, why would he have to say that? I already gave you that answer. I'm just seeing if you guys are awake.
People were saying that their gifts were more important than
Right.
other people's gifts.
Right. I'm more important than you. Okay. So whoever was the pastor or whoever was the whatever, they said, I am better than you are. My role is more important. And we got to get to, and we got to understand this. They're in church. They're everybody, and that's what he's saying. Every role is important. And Paul goes through that in 13 or 12 by saying, look, you can have an eye, and an eye is very important. But can your body function without an eye? Well, technically, yes, it can function. It doesn't function at peak performance, okay? But your body needs that eye.
One thing I always think about when we have the conversation about the body and the different parts.
Right.
is people don't realize how important their pinky toe is. Because it is your balance. That's how you balance when you walk. And so if you don't have that pinky toe, I mean, a lot of times we don't think about our pinky toe being important until we stub it on something and we don't have it, or it's in pain, and then we're like, wow, that's a really important part of my body. Or when you get those inner ear problems and you lose your balance. You know, that's one of the smallest parts of your body, but it can cause such a big impact if it's not functioning properly.
Beautiful. And that's exactly what Paul's saying. You've got to have all of it. And again, I think that the vast majority of our churches in the West, specifically in America, are not as effective as we could be because all the parts are not functioning. There is so much giftedness connected to our church that's not plugged in that it's absolutely blow your mind. When you start talking to people what they do and what they have to offer, and yet they're not connected, and it's not just us, anywhere. Like right now, we're like, oh man, we need a pianist, right? Because Kenea's, she's got the bum shoulder, she can't play. So we've been asking folks, Miss Huckabee, who goes to Bethesda, to come. Well, guess what? In a church the size of Bethesda, there's 2 pianists sitting in that church, not being used right now. 2. First United Methodist in Carrollton, last I heard there were 5 that go to that church that don't play the piano in that church. I could name about 15 churches in Carroll County that could really use a pianist, right? So there's giftedness in the body. And that's why I've always felt like, hey, whatever we have to offer here at Tyus, if you need it, holler. Because I would expect, if I need something, like when we needed chairs, I call the BCM, come get the chairs. So whatever, not just resources, but giftedness. You know, we ought to be able to use that in the entire body, but it's interesting to see in the local fellowship what kind of giftedness we have that just doesn't get used because they're not plugged in, they're not involved. So again, Paul goes through that, and my thing is he gets to the place where if we're going to be able to work together, 1 Corinthians 13 is sandwiched in the middle, and Rainer does a real good job of bringing this out through the whole story is it has to be motivated and driven by love. And again, we live in a culture that doesn't understand how love works. So that's why Paul, he goes through the list in 12, he gets to the end and he says, I wish that you would desire the better gifts. He says, I'm going to show you a more excellent way. And what's 1 Corinthians 13? Love. And there's the disconnect. The reason churches have problems is we really truly don't love like Christ loved. That's what you boil it all down. Any conflict, not any, since we talk about words coming in here, most of the conflicts that take place in church really come down to a lack of love. Let's look at it real quick. Don't want to overstate it, but I don't want to understate it. 1 Corinthians 13, and I read it last week and said, you know, and Rainer says it this way too. He says, if we just get these right, just 4 and 5 of 1 Corinthians 13, revival would break out in the church. The conflicts, those of you that experience the conflicts, would they have gone away if this was the reality and this is what defined the churches in the context of the challenges? And I will affirm that they would have in the ones that I've experienced. The first one is love is patient. If in the body we're patient with one another, that fixes a lot of problems right off the bat, right? 1 Peter, he says, love covers a multitude of sin, right? I can tolerate. I can put up with it. I can be patient with someone who doesn't understand. Either they're a young believer or they're an unbeliever. Now the problem is, and this is where we're in a catch-22 in the church, and TJ, this goes back to the conversation we keep having in here, is shouldn't be identified as a member of the church unless you're really a believer. There's our problem. Because is everybody that's a member of Tyus a believer? Just be real. Be real. You don't have to think of anybody. Just be real. No, there's no way. Just straight numbers tells you there's no way, right? Because the first thing that God tells us to do is He is love and we're to love. If we say we love our brother but we don't love God, He's not in us. So the first thing He says is love is patient and kind. Puts them both together. I think they go well together. Love does not envy or boast. So did Paul just fix the problem in 1 Corinthians 12? Right there. If you really love, then it doesn't matter the position. You don't say, well, I'm better than you are. I'm an eye. You're a pinky toe. Right? You're not important. Well, if it's truly love, then no. Everybody's important. We got to have all of us. It's not arrogant or rude. And then this one, again, fixes all the problems. It does not insist on its own way. What were the problems at the challenges that you guys faced? Was that one of them? Insisting on its own way?
Very specifically that.
Very specifically that. Okay. Right. Okay. And that's my point. If we function in this, just in these two, it will revolutionize every relationship that we have. It will revolutionize every situation that we function in, and ultimately it will, in the context of which we're talking, it will affect how the church functions. Because it doesn't insist on its own way. And that's where I've functioned for the last 15 years. Ask Steve Swafford, my senior pastor, when I was leaving Fullerville, give me some words of wisdom. And one of them was, if it's not going to matter 100 years from now, don't worry about it. You have to ask yourself, every time a battle comes up, is it a hill worth dying on? And the battles that I've had to face, and again, I use that term very, very loosely, they haven't been battles, but the situations that I've encountered, yeah, they weren't worth fighting for. The big one for me was, it's been 10 years ago. I thought it was important that we change the way our worship service looked so it would be more appealing to a lost community. We changed everything up for about 3 weeks, man. We didn't take an offering up in a Baptist church, right? We sang with a band. What else did we do? We did 3 or 4 things. And finally, after 3 weeks, somebody said, Justin, this is not working. Why did it take you 3 weeks to tell me it wasn't working, right? After the first week. And I think they were just, they were like, let's see if this works.
And they were being patient.
They were. And I'm telling you, that's why this dynamic works here, is because genuinely the vast majority of people here are patient and kind. They are. The term I always use is good folks. If you need a shirt, you ask somebody in Tyus, I bet you get one off somebody's back. There are people that are in this congregation that would do it without hesitation. So that's what I'm saying. While we're doing, is it a big deal? No, not a big deal, but I think it's important that we bolster what we do. And so I was able to say, hey, look, dude, this is not that big of a deal. It's not going to matter 100 years from now. And it won't. What we do over there and how we do it, the structure, really is not what's going to impact people's lives. It's the gospel that's going to impact people's lives. Now, if somebody gets mad because I'm preaching the gospel, then we've got a problem, right? That's the hill to die on. Justin, you can't preach anymore. Wrong. That would be the hill to die on. You can fire me. The rest of the list is, and that one to me is the one that sticks out, especially in church culture and the challenges that we face, because so many people say, well, I won't. It's not irritable or resentful. I'm not going to talk about that one because I take it personally. Does not rejoice at wrongdoing, but rejoices with the truth. Love bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. And then the first of verse 8, love never fails. It's pretty simple, the concept, but again, bring it home. How hard is it sometimes for us to really love like we're supposed to at home? Right? As long as Jill and I have been married, as much as I love her, there's still times where that stuff does not define me as a husband. It doesn't. And she would be probably willing to testify that there are times when it doesn't define her as a wife. As an employer, as an employee, as a student, as a teacher, you fill in the blank. There are times where we realize, we failed. So the natural correlation would be, right, it's going to happen in the church too. So we've got to address it. We've got to realize that if we're going to function, we'll function as a body, but we're motivated, driven by, defined by love. And that's where he keeps getting around to, is understanding that it's all about the love. So let's look at a couple of questions real quick. I didn't deal with this, so we'll ask it, and then I'll give you the background for those of you that haven't read the book. But those of you that have, maybe you can give some insight. The first question he says, or he gives a statement and gives us a responsibility. It says, explain how country club membership and church membership are so different. For those of you that haven't read the book, he just tells a story. He remembers as a kid that a country club was coming to town, and all I could think was Tally Mountain down in Tallapoosa. Y'all know about Tallapoosa's country club. Sorry. All right, it's the same that scenario. Tally Mountain, there's a golf course, and there's a pool, and I don't know what membership is, but it can't be much, right? And you get to hang out at the pool. You can swim for free or whatever. And you get discounts on your golf. That's what I think of when Rainer tells a story as a kid. It's like when he was growing up, they were going to build a country club and same kind of thing. They had a pool and a meeting room, and it was like, hey, I'm a member of the club. Now, to me, you can take it a step further and go to Sunset Hills. That is a country club. I can't even walk on their golf course. I can't just call and say, hey, I want to play around. Well, you're not a member. A member takes me, I can play, but I can't just go play Sunset Hills. I can't hang out at their club. Like, I can go maybe eat dinner there, but I have to be a member. Take it to Atlanta, and you can't even get in unless you're a member. Go all the way to the nth degree, the Masters, right? Yeah. Well, even the Masters, you have to be invited to be a part of that membership. So, yeah, sure. You can't play, you can't get in.
We worked there one time.
Okay.
That was like ridiculous.
Yeah. Hoity and toity.
Yeah.
Right. Okay, so he gets this. He gets this idea, and what he talks about is that being a member of something, because I'm a member, then I deserve this. All right. Well, how does that translate into church life? Do we see people function with that approach to the church?
I think in the South, especially, a lot of those older generations that built the church,
right?
Born and raised in the church and spent their entire life dedicated to bettering the church, and then the generations now are like, oh, my grandma and my grandpa go to church, my aunt uncle go to church, whatever, I guess, I'm in it. I'm good.
Right.
I'm a member by default.
Right.
Right. I was born into this.
That's right.
And then it's hard for anybody in that scenario to really, I want to say, care. Another word.
Be invested.
Yeah, be invested.
Yeah, what we're talking about.
In that, because it's like, everybody else already taking care of it. It's just been given to me. It's like, cool. It's pretty cool, I guess.
Right.
Until you get bored of it.
Right.
And then you stop going.
Okay.
Country club pool, right? You go
Sure.
3 weeks every day for 3 weeks, and you're like, okay, I'm bored of the pool.
Right. Absolutely. What else? Other places where we would see that take place in a church setting, where I'm a member, so I deserve or I get or whatever.
Well, what he talked about was like church membership is about you serving your church. Country club membership is about someone serving you and doing what you want.
Right.
And that is not how we should function in the church. A lot of times it is how a lot of people function is
Right.
things should be done my way because I'm a member. But it really should be, what should I be doing to serve in my church instead of what should my church be doing to serve?
There you go. The Kennedy quote, right? That's not what this country should do for you, but what you can do through this country, or something to that effect, right? Same thing, yeah. It should translate into church. That not what do I get out of it, but what can I give to it? And I think that's when you get the investment. That's when you get the buy-in. That's when it becomes important.
You realize how much you get more out of it when you do give into it.
Sure.
But you don't you don't see it until you actually do it.
Right.
Once you actually start investing, then you start seeing what it really is, what it's all about.
There's the $1 million question. How do you get people to take that step? Right? That's a big question. I've watched this, we did our high attendance Sunday. There's probably 2 families, maybe 3, that have been in Sunday school consistently since then. Why'd they show up that Sunday? I don't want to do high attendance days every quarter. There's some church growth models that's what you're supposed to do. You got to be having a friend day and a friends and family day and pie the pastor day to get people to come to church.
You want to get 1,000 people? Pie the pastor day.
Right, absolutely, absolutely. I don't know, and that's a tough quandary from me sitting back here, and we jokingly talk about the performance base, but when you look at when attendance is down, what we need to do, how we get people more plugged in and more involved, and we know the answer is they've got to see it, and I think that happens the first time somebody serves in children's church or they help out on a work day. You can see it through the life of our church. That's where people they came and served. They're like, hey, there's some good people at our church, and I like hanging out with them, and I want to be with them more.
They just don't. Somebody coming into the community doesn't get that feeling.
Sure.
I mean, yes, they're going to feel welcome and they're going to feel like it's a cool place to be, but you can't really get to know someone just on a one-time Sunday morning visit.
Right.
But if you come and eat dinner with us on a Sunday night or do a service with us or whatever,
right,
you're going to get more of that interaction.
So true, sister. So true.
You asked how do you get people to take that jump?
Right.
It's really, we've already discussed both ways. One is much easier than the other. You can put on a show, and song and dance, have a raffle,
right,
make it pretty, and do all of that.
Right.
Or you can love people and invest in people and disciple people.
Right.
Which is really, really hard and time consuming.
Right.
So 9 times out of 10, what's the quickest, easiest route to take? Let's just put on a show.
Right.
Let's have a big tent revival or whatever you want to do, And right, because discipleship, all that takes a long time, a lot of effort.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So maybe that's it. It's got to decide what you want to do and what you want to be. I think we've made that decision. I think we're pretty consistent in that. I mean, will we still have a high attendance day from time to time? Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's fun, especially if there's a little competition going on between Bobby and Ricky. Do it, man. Oh, you get 22. Oh, I get 23. Oh, I get 25. I'll go ahead. You may get a family out of that. And
Are they busting out the old the church member list?
Yeah, man.
Going back and getting people.
They're calling everybody. They're calling everybody, man. We're gonna try to get everybody to tie us out someday. So again, that's what I said. This as we go through this for the next 6 weeks, nothing revolutionary, but I hope that it is just a reminder for us. Hey, these are the important things. These things that I need to put a priority on in my life, and we as a congregation, we need to put a priority on this and pursue the right relationship with Christ, but then, like you're talking about, a right relationship with people as well. So, all right, let's pray together. Father, what a privilege to be in this room week to week. Lord, I thank you so much for the faithfulness of this group. Lord, and I pray that you just prepare us for the days ahead, Lord, especially as we look to transitioning and get some new class started or rebooted or whatever, Father, and I just pray that you would guide us as we go the days that are ahead of us. Father, guide us through this morning. May what we say and do be pleasing in your sight. We pray in Jesus' name. Amen. Are you ready to rock and roll in September? Mad Whack?